Test. Oh, yeah, looks like I'm good. Okay. I'm Phil Wyman, and this is the Wild Theology Podcast, where the world, the humans in it, and God are all wilder than we've been told.
That's your intro.
So, you'll get philosophy and theology and crazy stories that come from 30 years of pastoring,
Boring.
20 years of festival work,
Whatever.
and the mud and blood of wrestling with the living in the spaces angels fear to tread.
Ooh, trying to sound interesting, are we?
Oh.
Yeah, you think you got something to say?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem,
Look, I'm
dimwit.
a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah, you tightened your shoes this morning.
Whatever. We're Phil Wyman, and this is Wild Theology, where you get to argue with your own ideas.
And lose.
That's the point. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Phil Wyman. Oh, here we are in Glenn Daly's backyard in Salem, Massachusetts. And I'm here with Glenn Daly. And Glenn Daly.
Hello out there. I love Phil Wyman. He's a great friend.
Yeah,
He's
I paid him.
introduced me to a lot of people.
I paid him to say that. Thanks, Glenn. And this is also my good buddy from Jew and Gentile Walk into a Bar Mitzvah.
Yeah.
So this is Charles Bretan, and he's here in Salem hanging out with me.
Yeah, trying to get the Jewish perspective of witchcraft. The high holidays are over, so looking to cast some spells for the rest of the year. Spending some time with good friend Phil frickin' Wyman, the Welsh troubadour. Hanging out, getting to experience some of Glenn's wonderful hospitality here. And this is beautiful backyard, smoking cigars and talking philosophy, or as we say, bullshit. And we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah. So we're, I don't do this on my podcast when I do interviews. I sit down and talk about a cigar we're smoking. But because it's you and you guys do that,
thank you.
I'm honoring a Jew and a Gentile Walk into a Bar Mitzvah with a cigar start.
Our bad influence is expanding.
It's expanding. You guys have corrupted me, apparently. And it's starting off with a cigar review. So, what do you got there?
I have the Tabacos Baez, which is from My Father's Cigars. It's actually their short fill cigar, and it's one of the best short fills that are out there. Not that fill is short, but it's a short filler cigar, meaning it's basically the scraps after they do the nice, real long fillers.
Yeah.
And since my father has some really good long filler cigars, this is great tobacco in a short fill.
Yeah.
Very, very inexpensive, great lawn mowing golf cigar. Wonderful cigar. And what do you have?
I'm on the road these days, so I don't have a lawn. Okay. And I don't golf either. I'm not your typical pastor.
All the time you spend in the UK and you're not on the links?
I'm not on the links. No. I've even met the guy who has Celtic Manor, where the golf course that was made for the Ryder Cup.
Right.
It was the first one that was designed specifically for the Ryder Cup. Mm-hmm. I've been there, and I know the owner of the course.
Ooh.
I've met a billionaire from Wales who said to me, when I turned around and looked at him, he said, "Nice beard." Now, mine was shorter at the time, and his and mine were very much alike, but he had a goatee. And I learned at that moment why he was a billionaire. He said, "Nice beard, but mine's better." And I said, "It's pretty good, but it doesn't go up all the way." So that was great. That was Sir Terry Matthews. But yeah, so I've got the Gurkha Assassin, and this is quite a dark cigar, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Mellow kind of start to it for such a Gurkhas typically have kind of a biting start to them oftentimes. They're very bold cigars. But this, for a Gurkha, started off quite mellow and almost a chocolatey. A chocolatey kind of flavor with a bit of spice to it. That
Mm-hmm.
like when you were first
Right.
surprised the time you had that dark chocolate and it had a little bit of cayenne pepper in it or
right,
something
right,
like
right,
that.
like a Mexican chocolate.
Yeah, but when they add the spice into so it's a bit like that. It's kind of a nice. I'm
Very
surprised, and it's a torpedo, which I love torpedoes. And, it's just great shape. So that's my start with a cigar.
Okay.
Glenn's not smoking a cigar, so he's going.
No, I need some water from all the talking. Excuse myself and go get a bottle.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, would you grab me a bottle of water too? I might need that from the smoking. Thank you. So when Charles said he was coming up to Salem, I was so excited. I mean, like, man, I've hung out in your neck of the woods, but I've got a weird neck of the woods, and I love to show people my neck of the woods. So he's been hanging out here in Salem. Now, we're going to get to the topic I want to talk to Charles about. What he's been reading and what he's been thinking. Because whenever we get together, we smoke cigars or pipes.
Now pipes.
The famous, some of you have already heard this story about the famous pipe that Charles gave me.
Right.
I was leaving his house. He said, "Why don't you smoke a pipe?" And I said, "Well, a pipe's just a little too hot in my mouth." He said, "Have you tried a Churchill?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to spend the money on that." And then he handed me a box that was wrapped as I was leaving, and he and his wife were watching me. And I opened it up, and there was a church warden pipe.
Peterson.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful pipe.
And he said, "This was my father's."
Well, this is my favorite.
Yeah. So, and I just went, "Oh my gosh!" So now whenever I get it out, I'm just like, it just touches my heart so deep. So anyway, this is that famous Charles, the church
warden gifter,
the Jewish church warden gifter.
Right? Wasn't that the fourth in Anthony Trollope's Barchester Towers series? The Jewish church warden, wasn't that? Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
Right. There was the Barchester Towers, the warden, and then the Jewish warden. Right.
Okay.
I think that was it. I'll have to look that up.
I haven't read that. You're ahead of me on this one. So,
that's Scottish literature.
I only do Welsh.
Yeah.
So
you're missing so much. Trollope, great sense of humor, and he skewers both the high church and the low church. So beautifully.
We deserve some skewering.
Yeah.
We church people.
He gives it to the Anglican Church and the Church of Scotland very nicely. Like I said, both high and low.
Okay.
Get it from him.
High humor, low humor, high church humor, low church humor.
Exactly.
Is that what you're telling me? Okay.
Well, the high church he gets with low humor, and the low church gets a little higher humor. And then hopefully somewhere in the middle he finds Jesus.
God. So you've been in Salem for a couple days.
I love this wacky place.
Yeah.
I love the wackiness. It's wonderful. I love the history. I'm a fan of Hawthorne. So I got to see the House of the Seven Gables, and I counted, and there were actually 7 gables on it.
All right.
Which was good. It's glad to know that your literary heroes are also good at math. Saw the Custom House, and it says Custom House, but it looked pretty generic. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't sure how custom it was. But what's interesting, and I tweeted this out the first day I was here, that I haven't seen this many women dressed in all black since my last academic conference.
Did they have pointy hats there?
No, pointy heads.
Pointy heads.
Yes. But anybody who has ever been to any kind of humanities discipline conference, you know immediately somebody's discipline or political leanings by how they dress.
Mm.
And all the feminist critics were all black.
Who sends the memo?
I don't know, but they all have it. And it's amazing. And of course, the only people wearing really fancy clothes, they're interviewing.
Okay.
Everybody else is wearing jeans and
right.
Birkenstocks, and then you see somebody in a suit, and you're like, "Oh, when's your interview?"
Right.
So it's interesting, but also with all the tourists coming to town and some of the things they're wearing, the people watching is great, and you just wonder, do they wear that every day, or do they just do that when they came here?
Well, I can point you out to the locals who wear it every day.
Well, I'd say that's different, but I'm saying you can see from some of the people that were towards you, like, was this like, oh, I get to wear this and be this person, and,
right? And
the rest of the time you're hiding, or
yes,
are you really? That's you, and you just came here. So that was fun. Got to hang out at the Haunted Happening stage that you've been running for 20 years.
Yeah.
Great music. There were some wonderful
the
acts.
bands this weekend and they're all local people.
Mm-hmm.
We're all friends who've been hanging out for years. And, of course, around Paul Duffy.
Mm-hmm.
He used to run open mics, and so he's just got locally, and he's just got a whole slew of musicians who he can call on, and this he kind of picks the best of for the Halloween stage.
Yeah. So it was one of those that I posted a video on Facebook.
Right.
One of the acts were very good. But the best part, though, we were walking around last night, and I got to see you work. We were not accosted. We were approached by some street preachers,
right,
who immediately wanted to know if Phil knew Christ and accepted Christ and knew anything about Christ. And when Phil said yes, he does, immediately launched into, well, why are you participating in these dark rituals and advocating?
We were just stinking walking down the street, man.
Yeah, minding our own business. But you had to engage. You had to.
I did. I'm sorry.
No. It was, and I just stood back watching the master at work, talking these guys down from the scriptural ledge that they were clinging to by their fingernails, because you would ask them a question and all they could do is quote a scripture back at you. But what about? And you're like, wait a minute. But let's talk about what is this situation? But in Romans, it's no. Wait. And how quickly they were speaking. They would ask you a question and didn't even let you respond, and were telling you were wrong.
You're right. Then that's kind of an amazing thing about a lot of what we call here in Salem the bullhorn street preachers. It's not that they all have bullhorns, but they all approach it in a monologue kind of way and a performance way. So they stand on a street corner with a soapbox and a bullhorn,
right? And
they want as many people to hear as possible. And so when you engage them one-on-one, they're still in that mode and can't get out of it. And it does tend to make a person feel like a number and not like a person. Oh, just somebody I got to get this out to. And 20 Halloweens. Now, Glenn has seen a lot more Halloweens than I have in Salem.
Since 1982.
Yeah.
It's really changed quite a bit. The street vendors that are out there now and all the music that goes on. An event every night, if they can, on the weekends. And Phil's done a lot of the work for that. He's a great guy. It's a fun place to visit, and it's very safe. Bring the children up here, come and visit. Check it out once.
Yeah. And it's so funny. Have you heard people talking about over the years, Salem, that's kind of a creepy place? Have you?
In the earlier years. It was a creepy place.
Yeah.
There was not really a lot of action going on. Vandalism took place because kids are young and wild. And that can still happen, but it's something to be enjoyed now. You come out and it's festival and carnival. And, and you should experience. You should get up here for it.
And it's not participating with the works of darkness.
No. Or sanctioning them,
or
as you were accused of.
Yeah.
And they finally turned their attention to me, and one guy said, "Do you believe homosexuality is okay?" And I just looked him in the eye and said, "Yes." And he didn't know what to say.
He didn't. You freaked him out.
I freaked him out.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, but in Romans," I said, "No, not Romans, Leviticus." But in Romans, no, Leviticus. He goes, "What about Leviticus?" So, because the verse about not a man laying with man only has to do with ritual prostitution.
Right.
So as long as they're not practicing ritual prostitution, homosexuality is fine. But Romans says homosexuality. No, but Leviticus, you got to go to the source. He says, well, no, you have to read the whole Bible. I said, I do. I said, well, in Romans, they go, oh, you're talking about your Bible.
Right.
He said, well, it's not mine, it's the King James Bible. What Bible do you read? I go, I read Tanakh. What's Tanakh?
I think that is what he said.
Yeah. I'm like, well, it's Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. You know, he goes, oh, you mean the Hebraic, the Judean beliefs.
You were really kind there. Judean beliefs is a really funny thing to say, but you were kind and you said, yes, I'm Jewish.
Not Judean. I'm actually born in America. But yes, I do follow the Jewish beliefs.
Right.
Yeah. But it was interesting. And then they just started walking away screaming that don't follow us, because Phil and I, because we are advancing the dark forces. Yeah. Like, okay, well, we're going to get a beer. Bye.
So you've experienced kind of a full spectrum of what Salem looks like.
Yeah.
In October. Yeah. And you know it's one of the things, hanging out on the streets, and then when you bump into those guys, you realize how quick they are to just attack and correct every single thing they disagree with. Yeah. And kind of like a squirrel seeing a shiny thing or whatever, you know. Oh, there's a nut, go grab it. And not being able to focus on one thing. Every single thing they hear they disagree with, they have to jump on immediately. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it kind of gets you nowhere, but it's argumentation after argumentation after argumentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt like, come on now, stay on track, guys. You wanted to talk about salvation. Let's stick with that and go deep. And, you know, I think within less than 2 minutes, oh, you were a Pentecostal pastor. They allow women to preach in the pulpits. I'm like, really?
Really?
So you can't be saved because women might preach in the pulpit.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I was part of a denomination for 20 years that a woman started. That could be really bad. Doesn't matter that the sick were healed and and people came to Jesus by hundreds of thousands during her lifetime. It didn't matter. She was a woman. And they didn't know what to do with Deborah in the Old Testament.
Oh, yeah. No one does.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
well, I do. I just kind of figure, well, God chose her to lead.
Right. Yeah.
He can do that to whoever he wants.
Right. God's prerogative.
Yeah, I sure know enough, male pastors who are trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That. Yeah, and it's interesting. So there's an interesting thing of Pentecostalism.
Mm.
Women can't be pastors in a number of denominations, or at least, even if they can, they tend not to allow them to be.
Mm.
But then you go on the mission field,
right,
and you can't get enough men to travel out on the mission field. And all in the mission field, so many of the missionaries are women in the Pentecostal denominations. And that's the equivalent of saying, well, a woman can't be a pastor, but it's okay if she's an apostle.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
What kind of thinking is that? That's so backwards, but it happens all over the place. So anyway, we kind of went way aside, and that's okay. But I want to know what you're thinking and reading.
What am I thinking and reading? Let me think about what I'm reading. Actually, because of a confluence of a number of things from this summer, been reading a lot about death and afterlife.
Okay.
My father-in-law passed away in August.
Okay.
And just prior to that, a good friend, J. Dana Trent, published her new book, Desert First, about learning to let death enhance your life. Because as she puts it, or as her mother put it to her, life is a terminal condition. No one's getting out of here alive. So, make the most of your life.
Right.
And it's her story of the year that she spent going through the grief process and taking her mom's remains on a road trip to all her favorite places.
What?
Yeah. They
what a cool thing.
Yeah, they had her mom was cremated, and they took her to all her favorite places
Wow.
in the country. Yeah, yeah.
What a great way to kind of remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A great process.
Yeah.
And so that came at the same time, and so reading about that, and then we recently did a podcast on hell and afterlife. So of course,
Right.
you know, and then at our Drinking Religiously group that meets every second Tuesday of the month.
Glenn's laughing at that title.
Yeah. where we meet at Four Saints Brewery.
Yeah, so that's why.
In Ashboro.
Yeah.
Shameless plug for our sponsor. Go, Joel. I forget where our discussion started, but it ended up with Afterlife, and Father Joe, who co-hosts the event, was saying how, we seem to be obsessed with death a lot, just as people.
Right.
So it just seems that's something that has seemed to be pretty prevalent the last few months.
Right. Well, so this is interesting because you also mentioned to me that you were reading a book, or at least you brought it up, that had to do with Saving Paradise. Was that
Saving
the name?
Paradise. Yes,
Yeah.
Saving Paradise. Yeah, and in fact, that's one of the things that kind of started this. So for the listeners of my podcast, A Jew and a Gentile Walk into a Bar Mitzvah, shameless plug, our friend Kristen Lee Mitchell.
No, here it's not shameless. It's guiltless.
Guiltless. It's guiltless.
Yours is
Okay.
a guiltless plug because it's you.
Right. Well, after Wild Goose, this last year, Jews are really good at guilt,
Right.
but you Christians have really taken it to a whole new level with the shame thing.
And that's actually fairly new.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah.
That is not.
No. Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, where did this all come from?
Well, and that's happening. We're getting a real aside here, but that's happening predominantly, not totally, but predominantly happening in progressive and liberal strains of Christianity, that there's a focus on shame, because the conservative evangelical has typically been all about guilt.
Right.
And then there's the forgiveness of sin, and following the forgiveness of sin, there's no more guilt. And then there's like this forgetfulness that we want to attach to it. So you've been forgiven, it's forgotten, you're good. And that's been a strength of a conservative evangelical Christianity, so that people who have done terrible things in their lives now find a new community and a family when they didn't have one before, and maybe it's even hard to rebuild that, and then people are trying to help them rebuild back into their families. But you're right, we've gotten good at shame recently.
Yeah, using that as the tool to move you toward the repenting. We're going to shame you until you repent.
Right. Or shame you, social change. Your company shouldn't do this, we're going to shame you.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is a shame around sexuality in the body.
Right.
So
Right.
was just. But so anyway, so Kristen Lee Mitchell, she does to me what I do to you every time I meet her. I've got 6 new books I have to read.
No, gosh. Yeah.
So she said, you have to read Saving Paradise so we can talk about it.
Okay.
So I did.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. And the premise, the 2 theologians who approach it, their study through art history, sacred art, and they noticed as they were touring holy sites in the Middle East as well as Mediterranean, Europe, and some other parts of Europe, that for the first 1,000 years the art was focused on life, resurrection, and paradise.
Right.
And then they noticed a distinct and abrupt shift, that the imagery over the last 1,000 years was focused on crucifixion and death.
Yeah.
And so they look at historically what was happening in the church during those times that might account for this idea that we're no longer a church and faith focused on life and redemption, and going and creating paradise,
Right.
but one focused on death and sin and crucifixion and suffering.
Right.
So, so read that. Yeah, that's what it said. It seems that there's been a lot of death issues in a lot of what I've been reading.
Yeah. That particular point really captured me because I've struggled with for quite some time with the fact that it seems like a lot of Christianity in the circles I've been in has moved away from having a relationship with God that has promises for what comes after.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that that's forgotten, it's just that it's not focused on as much as it was at one time. And perhaps at one time it was focused on solely, and there wasn't much thought about here and now and the earth here and now.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's switched over and it's all about how our Christianity affects the moment. And we've lost any kind of dialogue and consideration of the hereafter for the here and now. And that, for me, that's a concern because I feel like we lose religion completely if we give up our focus on a hereafter that comes. So when you just mentioned the name Saving Paradise, I thought, oh my gosh, I got to read this book. So I don't know about you, but there's a big part of my faith that's all about it's about what happens after I die,
Right?
you know, and yes, it's about a relationship with God now, but that's even has elements that lead me to a hereafter.
Right. Right. What you're doing here now is preparation. It's making sure that there is a paradise and you're in that relationship.
Right.
And, in Judaism we talk about, not just waiting for the world to come, but creating the world to come on earth.
Right.
And the concept of tikkun olam and completing creation. That it's our task that we're supposed to be working toward making the world to come.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I appreciate so much about Glenn is always like, I just thank God for everything.
Yeah.
He can
great
make
attitude.
Eggs. He can make eggs in the morning and be thanking God for the eggs.
Yeah.
Lay out here in the backyard in his hammock, and he's reading the Psalms and just thanking God for the wind that blows and the sun that shines, and when it's warm and when it's cold. It doesn't matter. It's just thanking God for all of it.
I was raised Catholic, but now I'm a Christian. That might sound kind of funny, but when Christ enters you, he changes your life forever, and it happens in an instant for some, and for others it takes 46 and a half years, like me. And, since that day, my life has been nothing but a blessing, and they keep on coming, and there is no shame in Christ anymore because he takes it away from you. And as long as you stay with him, you'll never be shamed again. And that's basically where I am right now, and I just try to enjoy life the best I can. I'm not doing the best I can for Christ. I should be out there more in the streets, and I don't get in there. But I still thank God for what he did for me through Jesus Christ. And it's a pleasure to be sitting here with Phil and his friend Charles. They're teaching me a lot. They're well-educated men, well-read. And it's a great pleasure to have them here as my guest.
Oh,
thank you,
man.
guys.
Man. No.
Bang. In the heart. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much, Glenn. Yeah. So I do want to, I can't let this podcast end without asking you about one more thing you're reading about.
Okay.
So here you are, this Jewish fellow who's quite. I know that you love Rambam and you love the mystic Jews and you love Your heart is in these places, and you are reading about the Great Awakening,
Yes.
American Christian revival, and
Right.
Jonathan Edwards with the sinners in the hands of an angry God.
Yeah. No, there's
why are you studying up on this stuff, Charles? What's up?
because it explains so much of American ethos and culture that we have. Because even though, in terms of government and the Constitution, and that we do not have a theocracy, we're incredibly not in any way a secular state
Right.
that we claim to be.
Right.
This is a Christian country, in the sense that is the majority of believers and practitioners of any faith in this country.
Right.
98% of the founders of the country.
Right.
But many of whom came here because they were persecuted as Christians.
Right.
And so much of these secular American values that we espouse, when you look at them not even deeply, but just in a more serious way, you see that a lot have been influenced by religious and moral values, particularly Puritan ones,
Right.
to a really disproportionate amount,
Right.
considering their numbers,
Right.
and the where they were geographically. And so the Great Awakening is an interesting period in American history, but also in church history, because a lot of it came out of the political struggle as much as a theological struggle within the Anglican Church,
Right.
and the then Presbyterian, and then the Methodists.
Right.
And you see a lot of things that we are still struggling with playing out during that period.
Right.
So, yes, there's the theology at the heart of it, which is who gets to sit at the table of Christ.
Right.
Okay. And who gets to say.
Yeah.
And that was a big driving force, but it was also very much a political struggle, because it was Americans resenting the fact that the Anglican Church in England was the one deciding who was going to be their minister. And local churches saying, we'd like to have our own ministers, thank you.
Right.
We want them educated here in America.
Right.
And the churches, both the Anglican Church and then the other movement, saying, no, they're coming out of our seminaries.
Right.
Or
Harvard.
Thus Harvard.
Yeah.
Yes. Thus Yale.
Exactly. Yeah.
Princeton.
Yeah.
Right. Our Ivies were founded by these other movements.
Sure.
And it was as much a battle to get them acknowledged by the churches that were still controlling.
Right.
And you're reading that and you're like, does that sound like the revolution that's coming in a few years from it? And you also had the established church officials using the religious influence they had on civil authority to crack down on the itinerant ministers and preachers who were traveling up from the south into the Northeast and visiting various churches. And they would also stop and preach in the city commons for a few hours before they would go to the local church.
Right.
And they were, of course, not sanctioned and not recognized, and telling people that it doesn't matter if the Anglican Church says you're saved or not. It's have you witnessed, have you reformed, have you accepted Christ? And you can be the most giving, loving, kindest person in the world, but if you haven't confessed and converted, we don't care.
Right.
Becoming this threat to the establishment. And they would go to the civic leaders and put pressure on them as men of faith.
Right.
If they want to stay in the church and stay at the table, they'll crack down on these guys and not give them the permits and break up the crowds and stop them from preaching. So there's so many levels of the historical, of the unacknowledged conversion of government and religion in America. But it also, for me, explained a lot of the politics that led. I mean, there's a lot that obviously you see the first schism of the Reformation, leaving Catholicism. But then, where do all these other denominations come from out of these Protestant faiths?
Right.
And so
all the rebels.
Yeah. And while they had serious theological differences, with the Anglican Church and with the other movements as they broke from either a movement or from the church itself, a lot of it was also political. It was about who gets to say, and that was particularly in America. The local churches wanted local control. Right. And they resented having to wait for a minister to be sent over from England. So it's really a fascinating period of history, both American history and I think church and faith history. Right. That we kind of we read Jonathan Edwards. And that's what we think we know about it. And he, while was influential, there were many more influential ministers in that day than Edwards.
He was just the brilliant writer and thinker and philosopher that brought forward.
And one of the first to invite some of these other ministers into his church.
Wow.
Which, because of his stature, gave license to some of these other churches to say, well, if his church can do this, I can do this.
Yeah. He got away with it. We can get away with it too. Wow. So now you made a connection also. You said as you were studying some of this stuff, it reminded you of what I was doing with my thoughts on Christianity or spirituality as a whole and nomadism.
Because
nomadism as in being a nomad.
Being a nomad. This idea of itinerant preacher, that the label that they gave in the First Great Awakening was simply a designation that they were not licensed or sanctioned or appointed by the Anglican Church. That's all it meant. As opposed to an approved preacher, you were itinerant. You did not have a permanent church that was assigned to you. Subsequently, and mainly because of some of the charlatanism that occurred in the Second Great Awakening, we now use it as a pejorative. Oh, he's an itinerant. No one will welcome him. He has to leave town because he's too dangerous. Which there's nothing wrong with being dangerous either. And that's why I was thinking of you.
You calling me dangerous?
Yes. Oh. That's the best compliment I can give you.
I was going to say thank you.
And Glenn is just sitting there smiling, going, yeah.
This guy's trouble.
That's why we love you.
Oh, thank you.
And so this last year, you've been in your travels and you've been blogging a lot and podcasting a lot about what it means to be a nomad. Not because you're forced to be a nomad, that you're not welcomed, but to choose to be welcomed everywhere by not being welcomed anywhere. By saying I'm basically a citizen of the world. That I'm at home anywhere I go. So I don't have to be in one place. And so thinking about that, then reading about this term, the itinerant preacher, that might you add that and sort of reclaim that title and make it something of honor now. That, and again, very much going back to an original founding Christianity of not having a church.
Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, Jesus says as he's wandering around. And
where does the word need to be said?
And much of the early church. You're right. Much of those early desert fathers and wanderers worked off of that principle. They said, well, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Why should I? I'm going to model Jesus. And this is one of the things that he did. So that vagrancy became a practice, a spiritual practice. Just like they fasted, those desert fathers, they fasted radically. I mean, they were getting themselves in all kinds of trouble because people were saying, what are you trying to do, kill yourself? Get out of here, we don't want you around. Why are you living in a cave? Why are you sitting on top of a pillar? All those different things. But also there was a group of which, why are you wandering around like that? And they very early got in trouble by the 400s. Origen, Augustine, these guys were saying that they don't have anything to do with these guys. They are trouble. And a lot of it was based upon, as they're trying to establish the church, the local people were funding that church they were going to, but when some guy came from out of town, now the funds got diverted. And so there are academics who are saying we can't necessarily take Augustine at his word that all of these travelers were trouble. There was more going on. There was the political dynamic of it as the church was establishing itself. So he was trying to get the monks separated into their little groups. There we now have the monasteries, and beginning to set things that would eventually become the Benedictine rules. And the local pastors became the preachers, and the monks were just working and praying. Now you've separated out this nomadic group, and you've set them in one location. And wow, what a loss, perhaps it was. And then when you started mentioning the Great Awakening, here we have American Christianity exploding with these itinerant people. And I mentioned to you yesterday, one of my favorite titles comes from the Anglican Church in the late the 1890s and 1800s. They had this group called the Episcopus Vagantes, the vagrant bishops. And so lately I've been joking that the gospel is a tramp. It gets a bad reputation, and it doesn't want to settle down. It wants to go to the next place and catch the next heart. When you started mentioning this, I was going, oh my gosh, he's giving me more reading again. So in reading about the Great Awakening, where have you been going for that?
Well, like with many things that I read, I want to understand how things have gotten to where they are. What were the dynamics? The theology as well as the human idea of it. But then thinking, well, how does that inform what we're doing? I'm a great believer of the joke, those who fail to learn history are doomed to repeat it in summer school.
In summer school?
Summer school. We have such a short memory.
Does that have anything to do with your views on hell, summer school?
No.
I didn't think so.
But as such a young country, we also have a very short memory.
Right.
And our history is not that long. We should be able to remember it.
Right.
But we don't.
Yeah.
And that's why I said that looking at what was going on then, thinking about, progressive Christianity as a movement today, people leaving the more conservative mainstream evangelical churches, people labeling themselves ex-evangelicals, and
right.
These splitting offs, and people not wanting to be part of an established church, very much in the spirit of the Wild Goose Festival,
right?
And then reading what you would be doing all summer,
right?
And the idea of the nomad and nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah,
it just seemed to fit.
It does,
and it. I remember one of the stories you were telling me, on your second trip to Wales, people coming up to you who had seen you the year before, and commenting that the reason they came back to that festival was that that's now their church.
Yes.
And once a year they go, and that's their church now.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where I see that itinerant preacher, the vagabond bishop, that, go where people are.
Yeah. And I've been using the terminology that I slightly changed that we have gone where people are, but the church has neglected going where people go. And where we go, where we vacation, where we get away, where we relax, that says a lot about where our heart is, and then our heart opens up in that place. And if we're there with them, they open up in dialogue so much more, and I've seen that repeatedly over and over through festivals. We should probably...
Well, we met at a festival.
Yeah, we did. We were at the Wild Goose.
That's how this all started. Right, so it's Joy Wallace's fault, right?
Yeah. That's
Sorry,
right.
Joy.
Well, let's see. Gareth.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gareth Higgins.
Yeah.
I know. He was. That's how I got into it, through Gareth directly. So and then you came, and so
Yeah.
So thanks, Gareth Higgins and Joy and all the people involved with the Wild Goose. Jeff, thank you so much.
Yes.
brought these two nuts together, and we're going to cause trouble
as much
for
as
many
we can,
years to come.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And
as my favorite to say, God willing.
So I'm going to give my own shameless plug as we close out here.
Right.
May 7th and 8th, Austin, Texas. Multi-Faith Matters is having a gathering for people who are working in multi-faith settings. And it's particularly for Christian ministers who work in multi-faith settings. But I want to see like friends like Charles Bretan here be a part of that as well.
I'd love to do that.
Awesome, yeah.
I'll check when I get home.
So this is Charles Bretan.
The Jew from A Jew and a Gentile Walk into a Bar Mitzvah.
And Glenn Daly.
Thank you very much.
The most hospitable man in Salem.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
such a heart bigger than Salem. I don't know how Salem contains the heart and the kindness that this man has.
Yes.
And I say this with sincerity. I came literally as a stranger and was welcomed in his home, and have been made to me feel welcome throughout my stay.
Yeah,
it has been wonderful and outstanding. Thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you. And of course, being with you is always wonderful too.
Yeah. We should just get arrested for being together. So
there may be people who are working on it.
That's probably true. Thanks, bro.
You're welcome.
Thank you to my patrons who help make these missional travels and these podcasts possible. Without you, I couldn't do it. God bless. If you'd like to support this project, you can do so here on Patreon for as little as $1 a release. And at the most, that's $4 a month.
Why on earth would anybody want to support us?
Well, I think we're pretty cool, and maybe some people believe in what we're doing.
Oh, come on, you believe that?
Yeah.
Don't you ever think they're just a little too weird for the average person?
Yeah, sometimes.